Hi, everyone. Welcome to Six Figure Authors, the show that helps you take your writing career to the next level. I'm Andrea Pearson, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Joe Lalo.
And I'm Lindsay Baroker.
And this week, we decided we wanted to take a look at the 1,000 True Fans concept, the one that, what's his name? Kevin Kelly, I think, came up with. He kind of explained it a while ago, 2008 or something. Anyway, basically it's, having 1,000 true fans and how to keep them once you gain them. We wanted to delve into it because we haven't discussed it on this show before. And all three of us find the concept interesting. I guess we're going to go into news now, and I guess I'm first. I wasn't planning on going first, but okay. So I've had to put writing on hold again, which is super frustrating. I think anybody who's listening knows how frustrating it is once you get really excited to start writing, and then things external to you take over. But several projects I put off while recovering from surgery have reached boiling point, and some of them they relate to Christmas, so I had to get them done before tomorrow and the day after, because we're recording this on the 23rd of December. But anyway, so our toddler also has been super hard this last week. We don't know why. He's just been super mischievous, but I can't take my attention off of him for more than a few seconds at a time. So like yesterday, I went upstairs, I was like, I'm just going to go shower really fast. I hadn't showered in 4 days, guys. I was like, I have to go shower. I was gone from when I left downstairs and got to the bathroom, showered, and came back down. I was gone 15 minutes. And while I was gone during that time, he crushed graham crackers all over the living room, the kitchen, and the carpet and the couches and everything. And my 9-year-old, she just turned 8. She was like, I couldn't stop him. And I'm like, she's not strong enough to stop him anymore. And he's just too energetic. And of course, the messes he creates take way longer to clean up than they do for him to create in the first place. So it's been pretty discouraging. I need to get creative and figure out a way to keep him entertained long enough for me to get some writing in, and homeschool, of course. And I've been here in the past with my toddlers before. They just reach this point where they are super rambunctious, mischievous, and active. And I think listeners with little kids who have had little kids will recognize that. But and sometimes it takes me sitting down and figuring out what I need to do to keep them entertained while I write. And other times it's just waiting until the phase passes. Or of course it's the getting up early or going to bed late. And I'm like, okay, so either I need to embrace staying up until practically midnight to write, or I need to be okay with going to bed right after the kids do so I can wake up early. The problem with going to bed early to wake up early is I need that wind down time after the kids are in bed, because there's constant noise. Like I need that quiet time alone to myself where I can kind of stare at a wall for a while anyway. So it's just hard, and I'm not sleeping super well yet since the surgery. So I can't really sacrifice time in bed, and I can't anyway, because I get sick when I do. So I don't know. Hopefully next week I'll be more uplifting and less discouraging for listeners. Hopefully next week I'll be able to say, I finished a whole book. Wouldn't that be great? Over Christmas. It's not going to happen. Okay, Joe, your turn.
Yeah, you never know. But I don't really have very much to report. I sort of planned this period, this end of the year period, to be a time when I was sort of taking things easy. And in this case, taking things easy means I've written 20,000 words for the first book of, for book 4 of Greater Lands. So I'm keeping good pace, but it's mostly because I did a better outline than I did. I took it easy on outlines the past couple of books, and I have learned that I'm much better now if I have an outline than I'll pants my short stories and outline my long stories from now on. And other than that, I did some tax stuff, and 4 of my four of my books that didn't have audiobooks yet, I sent over to the audiobook folks. So I'll be filling out my audiobook profile, and that's about it for me.
All right, for the geeks in the audience, and this is what came to my mind when Andrea said it's easier to destroy graham crackers than clean them up. All right, for the Facebook group, first one to name who said this quote: as a matter of cosmic history, it has always been easier to destroy than to create. I'm sure lots of people said it, but a sci-fi person also said it. I'm going to share for the news a couple of software tools that listener and fellow Oregonian author R.A. Nargi, he writes the Star Rim Empire Adventures. He sent these to me after I was saying I wish I had a wiki of all my stuff, so it would be easy to find. So the first thing he suggested These are just a couple of software tools I thought you guys may be interested in too. Obsidian, and I'll put these in the show note, but this is a free connected notes software that makes it really easy to create your own mini Wikipedia for your series. You write plain text Markdown notes, and you can easily add links to other notes and tags. It makes it super easy to keep track of characters and locations. And that was Obsidian. The other one is Online Glossary Maker. And he says, an author who is also a coder, James Murdo, made this free tool to extract a list of all the proper nouns from your manuscript. You upload a Word doc, and the software then generates a list of all unique names. He says, my most recent sci-fi novel, which launches tomorrow or is launched by the time you hear this, had over 350 names, characters, planets, technology, historical figures, etc. The glossary is great because it also catches if you spelled a name inconsistently, which I am horrible about. And sometimes my editor thinks to make a note and checks them all, but sometimes some slip by, and it's usually a typo hunter's like, did you know you spelled Morgan with an E and an A in this series? No, I did not. But I think that's it for my newsy stuff. Andrea, did you want to introduce the idea, or do you want me just to read the... You were going to explain it, but then you were in the intro, you're like, some guy, Kevin Kelly, I think he said this thing. The idea is that if you have 1,000 true fans, you can make like $100,000 a year and enough to make a living on. So that's kind of what we're going to be discussing. But go ahead. Did you?
I was just gonna say, and now Lindsay is going to explain Kevin Kelly's theory, because you put all the notes in there. So
well, we were going to kind of summarize it, but he's done an updated version to his essay, and we'll link to that in the show notes too. And it's, I don't know, it's a couple pages. So I'm going to try to read. Let's see, guys.
You can just scan through it if you want. I mean, it's not that long if it's small font.
Is that the secret? It is in small font. I'll be squinting it. Okay, but yeah, I think oh shoot, I screwed it up. Okay, I'll just read it, because I think he said, it's better in his own words. Obviously, we're not the best at summarizing. If we were, we could write blurbs without whining about it. So he writes, to be a successful creator, you don't need millions. You don't need millions of dollars or millions of customers, millions of clients, or millions of fans. To make a living as a craftsperson, photographer, musician, designer, author, animator, app maker, entrepreneur, or inventor, you only need only thousands of true fans. A true fan is defined as a fan that will buy anything you produce. These diehard fans will drive 200 miles to see you sing. They will buy the hardback and paperback and Audible versions of your book. They will purchase your next figurine sight unseen. They will pay for the best of DVD version of your free YouTube channel. They will come to your chef's table once a month. If you have roughly 1,000 true fans like this, also known as super fans, you can make a living if you are content to make a living but not a fortune. Here's how the math works. You need to meet two criteria. First, you have to create enough each year that you can earn on average $100 profit from each true fan. That is easier to do in some arts and businesses than others, but it is a good creative challenge in every area, because it's always easier and better to give your existing customers more than to find new fans. Second, you must have a direct relationship with your fans. That is, they must pay you directly. You get to keep all of their support, unlike the small % of their fees you might get from a music label, publisher, studio, retailer, or other intermediate. If you keep the full $100 of each true fan, then you only need 1,000 of them to earn $100,000 per year. That's a living for most folks. And of course, not every fan will be super. While the support of 1,000 true fans may be sufficient for a living, for every single true fan, you might have 2 or 3 regular fans. Think of concentric circles with true fans at the center and a wider circle of regular fans around them. These regular fans may buy your creations occasionally, or they may have bought only once, but their ordinary purchases expand your total income. Perhaps they bring in an additional 50%. Still, you want to focus on the super fans, because the enthusiasm of true fans can increase the patronage of regular fans. True fans not only are the direct source of your income, but also your chief marketing force for the ordinary fans. The mathematics of 1,000 true fans is not a binary choice. You don't have to go this route to the exclusion of another. Many creators, including myself, will use direct relations with superfans in addition to mainstream intermediaries. I have been published by several big-time New York publishers. I have self-published, and I have used Kickstarter to publish to my true fans. I chose each format depending on the content and my aim, but in every case, cultivating my true fans enriches the route I chose. The takeaway: 1,000 True Fans is an alternative path to success other than stardom. Instead of trying to reach the narrow and unlikely peaks of platinum bestseller hits, blockbusters, and celebrity status, you can aim for direct connection with 1,000 true fans. On your way, no matter how many fans you actually succeed in gaining, you'll be surrounded not by faddish infatuation, but by genuine and true appreciation. It's a much saner destiny to hope for, and you are much more likely to actually arrive there. And I will post a link to the essay if you want to read it, and he's got the original one on there too. All right, Andrea, I'll let you talk.
Okay, for like 2 seconds. So yeah, like I said in the beginning, the purpose of this episode is to basically, we just wanted to delve into this to see if this is still accurate today, if 1,000 True Fans still applies today, and then basically talk about you know, what you do to get there and what you do to lose them and things like that. So we're going to go ahead and talk about whether, on our opinion, whether 1,000 True Fans still applies today. And Lindsay, it's your turn.
All right, I put myself first, did I? So yeah, I absolutely think it's still applies today. I actually came across this essay early on in my publishing career. I think I blogged about it maybe in 2011. And I think it's easier today in some ways than when he first wrote the original essay in 2008. And it's just, you know, you could always sell direct from your site, but it's easier now to integrate and use PayHip or whatever. And then we've got things like BookFunnel to help out with delivery. We've got Kickstarter. I don't remember if that was around in 2008. It's been around for a while. And Patreon. These are, you know, not quite as direct as selling from your site, but you're keeping a much higher percentage of the royalty, and you can interact directly with your those who sign up for it, your patrons or your Kickstartees, whatever they're called on that platform. So you can keep like a much bigger portion of what people pay, like above 90%, instead of, if you're self-published through Amazon and the other stores, you might be making 70%, which is not bad at all. But the traditional published people are making more like 10, 15%. And that gets really rough. Like, you really need to sell lots and lots of books to make a decent income on that. So I do think this still applies today, and it's a less daunting goal to shoot for. You know, it's kind of weird that it is, because you probably need to sell tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of books to find 1,000 true fans who adore your stuff and will buy everything. But it's like a little more concrete than, you know, it's kind of not forever necessarily, but it's not all about one book launch. It's about finding people who are going to buy every single book launch. So like every time you find one, that's helping you secure future income. Whereas especially if you write standalone stuff instead of series, it's every time you launch a new book, you're starting from scratch almost. I mean, you're building up a mailing list, of course, but it's very nice knowing, those of you who do Patreon and you get like monthly income, or every time you do a new project, it's sort of like, it's not guaranteed, but it's more guaranteed than, you know, how many you're going to sell at your next book launch.
I absolutely agree that, particularly with Patreon, that things have gotten easier in that regard. I feel like Patreon almost single-handedly is responsible for reinforcing and amplifying and underscoring the 1,000 True Fans concept. Like, it's generally a monthly thing, and therefore you sort of have a concrete accounting of how many people are signed up and at what level that they are. Like, we talk about concentric circles of fans. There's literally tiers that you can support at on Patreon. So it sort of gives you an idea. Well, here's folks who are in it for the books, and that's great, I love it. And here's folks who want to give me a little extra. So you really have a very good, it gives you an excellent picture of what your true fans look like. And also, it makes the $100 a year from each fan into a much more manageable $8.34 a month from each fan. Like, it just seems less when you do it that way. But also, I should point out, just as a side effect, as a side note with Patreon, apparently you can now, fans can now support you on Patreon annually. Like, it's now an option so that they can be like, I love you, and I know I'm going to support you for a year, and I don't want a $5 charge every month, so can I do 60 up front? And that's an option now. You know, there's also a flexibility involved with pay. I didn't intend to talk only about Patreon on this part, but the tools that exist now are really very good at giving you a clear picture and a direct method for people to support you, and you get just a clear as day number that you can sort of work toward if you're shooting for the mythical 1,000 true fans.
I love that about Patreon, because I usually pay for everything in a year at a time instead of going monthly, because, you know, it's usually cheaper. And plus I hate having to have lots of monthly things coming in and out of my bank account. Okay. So I'm kind of an oddball here. And I've always recognized this about myself when it comes to 1,000 True Fans, but I've always struggled with the concept. I'm going to address this in the next section, but I'm a practical person, and I know I attract practical readers. I don't believe even super fans buy everything someone produces in every format, and finding personalities like that in readers is very difficult. I don't know, a super fan who follows Kevin Kelly's model tends to have a disposable income, and they tend to be younger and fine with, in my opinion, throwing money all over the place, because this is how I am. I even when I'm so fangirling over something, I buy one. I don't buy more than one. The average target audience for nearly every author is someone in their 50-ish, 50s-ish. People in their 50s are much more practical than younger readers. They tend to be frugal, even if they're wealthy. But to answer the question, yes, I think the concept still works. And I definitely agree that it is easier now because of Patreon and Kickstarter. By the way, Kickstarter started in 2009. I looked it up while Lindsay was talking. But I will argue that it's possibly harder to maintain the 1,000 True Fans now than it was before. Basically, I don't know, even when I was producing enough content for readers to be spending $100 a year on me, keeping them engaged or catching their attention long enough to get them to follow through felt nearly impossible compared to the first 5 or 6 years of indie publishing. And there's a lot more noise and tons more distractions now. So, and those who tend toward that love, that appreciation, that kind of rabid sort of fandom that Kevin is talking about are far more easily distracted now than they were in the past. And this is just my opinion. Keeping their attention on you is harder now. And I know that is not necessarily true. That's just the way I perceive things, because that's how I am. Not necessarily the having a hard time keeping my attention, but I don't buy a whole bunch of different copies of something when I fall in love with somebody. And I don't know many readers who do, even the ones who are the rabid super fans of an author. Anyway, so I will be talking a little bit more about that again in just a minute, but we're going to go ahead and discuss, would 1,000 True Fans work, or would we be better served searching for 10,000 True Fans? We'll just discuss our opinions on that. And I think Lindsay's first, right?
Yeah, I did want to comment too on, not a rebuttal, but I think you've kind of got a period where, well, not so much, I think this is what the numbers tell us. As far as disposable income, you've got younger people in their 20s, kind of that dual income, no kids type of people that usually have a lot of money to spend. And then you've also got actually the 50s and up. Once the kids move out, often they have a lot more disposable income. So you are in that 30 to 50 range. That's probably going to be a tighter group. At the same time, people are making more as their careers, as they get older. So, I'm not saying that you're wrong or that's not your experience or anything. I feel like the whole 1,000 True Fans thing is that if you've had it work for you, you're like, well, yes, duh, obviously. And if it's a little elusive still, like I think a lot of folks in the audience are going to be like, well, maybe I have like 5 True Fans, but I just haven't sold enough books yet. Or also if you kind of switch series and pen names a lot, that's going to make it a little harder than when you're really concentrated, like the first 6 years, I think I only did high fantasy for the most part. So I think that made it a little easier because people that liked that and liked my style were going to jump on board. Whereas I know you, Andrea, have done some different things, and now medical romance and a new pen name. So I think it's a little more challenging. I think you're going to mention it later, talk a little bit about consistency too, as far as how that helps you attract people. So I'm not to like say, oh, Andrea, you're obviously all wrong or anything like that, because we all have our own experiences. But it's funny, I don't consider myself at all a rabid fangirl type. I never go to even if I enjoy an artist, I don't go to their concerts. I'm not going to buy their t-shirts, but I was laughing, I was reading your notes, and I do have some authors where I have the ebook, paperback, sometimes even the hardback. and the audiobook. And it's not because I was like, oh, I have to have every format. It's because over the years I've wanted different things, or I lost the paperback, so I've rebought the ebook, and then I decided I wanted to listen instead of reading, so I initially got out the audiobook. So some of these things too may play out over a career rather than like, oh, on release day.
That's a really good point. And I think that your point earlier, which I, it wasn't in your notes, and so I didn't have time to think about it, but you were like, it's more going to come into play when somebody's sold hundreds of thousands. And I've made six figures, but I haven't sold hundreds of thousands of different books. I mean, I've done really well with one specific series, but I think that I have several super fans, but I don't think I've ever had 1,000 true fans. And so I think that's a really good point. And I was like, that's a really good point. Hopefully I'll get there,
I'm sure you will. And, I think that this is actually almost more for traditionally published authors, I would say. At least it's not that it doesn't apply to us, but as indie authors, we already make 70% on the ebooks. We're not getting screwed over by the system as much, basically. But you have a lot of like mid-list, traditionally published authors who they're selling tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousand copies of a book when they release a new book, and they have a lot of fans, but because their percentage is so small, they may be lucky to make like 40, 50,000 a year. And by doing things like the Patreon or the Kickstarter or selling bonus things direct from your site, which is sort of ultimately even better, even though a lot of us authors, we don't want to do the extra tech stuff, myself included, or the customer service of doing things direct from your website. But so I feel almost that it's maybe even more for traditionally published authors than for indie authors, not that we can't discuss, which I'll do. So yeah, you already introduced like, would 1,000 true fans work, or do we need to search for 10,000 true fans? And interestingly, that was kind of my thought back in 2011 or whatever I first read this. Like, oh, as an author, you definitely need more than 1,000. You need 10,000, and that was before Kickstarter and Patreon and other ways of making other obvious ways. There's always creative people find ways to charge more and make more for, there's always the possibility of doing like a subscription for a web serial or things like that. But at the time I was thinking, well, I'm only making like $3.50 for each ebook I sell at $5. So you need 10,000. But yeah, I feel like we're a commercial for Patreon in this one. It's just easy, it's kind of sort of the easy way to do it this particular year. But, I've got people signing up at a $10 level, at a $5 level, and even a $25 level. And one person just randomly did $65 for his first charge. And I didn't even know people had the option to do that. And when I did a Kickstarter back in like maybe 2012 to fund the audiobooks of my first series, I had people pay $500 for, like $20 worth of signed paperbacks, and also having a character named after them in a story. So to make a living on 1,000 fans, you are going to have to be doing something more than just selling ebooks and making $3 or $4. But, and your casual fans may not be interested in paying for all those extra perks. Like, there's a lot of authors I'll read, but I'm not going to seek out if they have a Patreon or anything. But if I fall in love with a series, then I'm kind of yours. Like, I'll give you the money here. Just give me some cool extra stuff. And I think it is important to remember, like Joe pointed out, the concentric circles point that Kevin Kelly made in the updated essay. So along the way, while you're looking for your 1,000 true fans, you're going to find a lot of casual fans, and they add to your income as well. And also, as authors, we gradually build up large backlists. So when a new true fan finds us, or even a semi-interested casual fan, they might spend dozens or hundreds of dollars going back and devouring everything in your backlist, depending on how many books you have out. So really, you can actually make a living on fewer than 1,000 true fans as an author, assuming you've also got a lot of casual fans buying your books in the stores. I've only got about 500 people on my Patreon. I don't really push that much because it's extra work, but I make a lot more than 100,000 a year that he talks about, because obviously I'm selling in other places too. So it's just something to work towards, but understanding that on the road to 1,000 true fans, you're going to be selling a whole lot of other books in the stores.
Yeah, and something to think that's important is that the 1,000 true fans we're talking about don't exist in a vacuum. Like this is in the initial thing, the initial essay, but you don't, and as Lindsay said, you don't even really require direct sales if you're published because you're getting a much more larger slice than a lot of other, people who are creators. And the algorithm still exists, and organic book sales still exist, and word of mouth still exists. And those 1,000 true fans are doing more than just, paying you the money for your thing. They're talking about your thing, and if they're buying it on a platform, then they're given a kick to make it more visible to other people by moving up the ranks. During my highest earning years, I was doing virtually no direct sales. I think the only thing you could directly purchase from me when I was at my highest earning was I would do signed paperbacks, and I sold maybe, I don't know, 20 of them a year. It was not a thing. But I was getting between 600 and 900 pre-orders, and that's not a gigantic number, but 600 or 900 pre-orders was enough to get me started with a couple of dozen reviews before very long, and that would give me especially since I'm wide, a lot of those pre-orders were hitting on all at the same time on other pages and kicking me up into the top 20 of my genre. And so it doesn't sound like I should be making a really strong living with those sort of numbers, but it was literally my highest earning years. That's what I was looking at, because those fans were able to get me started and send me out to that next layer of fans who maybe are only going to be interested in this book, or maybe only in this series. But the true fans helped the casual fans find me. And obviously, naturally, 10,000 fans would be better. When we're talking about book sales, more is always better. And those same numbers probably wouldn't give you quite the same nudge now as they did then, because of a few things. I was actually talking to my sister-in-law about this earlier. Just the way that books are recommended, and organic discovery is a little bit harder, and advertising is a little bit more necessary. But don't underestimate the impact of a few hundred sales, especially when they're in a relatively short period of time. It can do it even on standard bookstores, and again, at $5 a book, you're making about $350 per sale. So 1,000 sales is $3,500. And that's the cost of a full high quality edit, a high quality cover, and a fair amount of promo. So if you have 1,000 true fans, and even if all they're doing is purchasing your book on the bookstore of their choice, they're starting your book off in the black, and every subsequent sale is earnings. Like, now the book is paid for itself. All the rest of that money is becoming your salary. So 1,000 true fans, I think, is an enormous benefit still today.
I love that Joe and Lindsay are both super encouraging about this, and my notes are all, yeah. But sorry, Lindsay, what?
I don't know. I was just going to say something snarky, but I decided not. But I think it's good, because I always want to tell people, yes, you can do this, but there's probably 95% of the audience is like, nah, man, I've been doing this for 10 years or 5 years, and I don't have any true fans yet, or I'm not enough to move the dial.
Or maybe they're like, I do have 1,000 true fans, but they're not really gonna do what you think. That's the way I felt. I mean, I know I have true fans, and your comment earlier about as life changes, like I can totally see myself when you said that, I'm like, I could see myself buying an audiobook, or maybe buying a print book so that, my daughter can enjoy it as well, and across the years. But then comes the problem of, is that, going to help you in the current year? Maybe not, but if you get 1,000 of them doing that across 10 years, I don't know. Anyway, okay, so I'm just going to give my comments the way I wrote them down, and then maybe apologize for them later. I don't know. So for me, in my current situation, I kind of feel like 10,000 true fans is necessary. I'm going to approach this from the perspective of someone who has their time swallowed up by young kids. So, being a mom is one of the only 24 hours a day jobs out there. But if you're writing books that you sell for $4.99, you absolutely have to be giving them outside perks too, like Patreon, Kickstarter, etc., in order to add up to 100 a year, unless you're writing that much in books every year, which if you have young kids, you're not. To make the math easy, and we're saying direct sales because that's one of his thing. He's like, direct sales from your website. Let's say you're getting $5 from every direct ebook sell. In order to get $100 from one person, that's like 20 books a year, which, yeah, unless you're James Patterson. Just kidding. Anyway, throw in a paperback and assume you're selling it direct for $12. That gets you about $17 per person, which is just under $6 books a year. And so I say 3 books a year is about the maximum some with young kids will be doing. Though I've done 4 books a year in the past with side projects, side books for the school and all that. But it was all before this current toddler came around. So I do know that more is possible, but your situation is going to vary. Add in an audiobook and voila, you've reached your goal. And unfortunately, this is where I addressed what I brought up earlier. And where I'm still processing my thoughts and just based off of what Joe and Lindsay have said. So most super fans are regular people too, even when they're obsessed with someone. And again, this is my perspective. When I'm obsessed, I don't become rabid. I'm just not that personality. I don't rabbit eyes. They don't always buy the book in every single format, but like Lindsay said, across, when their life situation changes or whatever, they might buy the audiobook and the print and all that. Anyway, sometimes it's because they can't afford to, other times it's because the format doesn't apply to them. And again, this is my experience, but like I have readers who would literally die before they bought an ebook, or literally die before they buy a print book. And I know that, you hold a gun to the head, they're probably going to buy a print book or an ebook, but they're not going to think about it automatically because it's not something it just doesn't occur to them. That's from what I've seen. Anyway, so what it all boils down to is to offer additional perks through something like a Kickstarter or Patreon account, which is super beneficial. If you can't do enough content every single year, like by way of a full novel, then a Kickstarter would be fantastic and Patreon would be absolutely fantastic. And we've already established those as making the goal easier to achieve. And then I also struggle with the work aspect of the 1,000 true fans, not getting the actual work done itself, because I have zero problems with putting my shoulder to the wheel, so to speak, but finding the time to do it. I need to create the content in the first place. Then I need to find the time to manage a Patreon account or Kickstarter campaign, then muster the enthusiasm. It's not easy to get enthusiastic when you're constantly in the red every single day. You're just burning both sides of the candle, and your candle's only half an inch thick, half an inch long. This is one reason why I don't do big book launches, because my abilities to get excited about things is really low sometimes. Anyway, let's see, where am I in here? Okay, so all while cleaning up after my kids and homeschooling. So Patreon fell for me because I barely had the time to create content in the first place, but it also fell for me, and in retrospect, it fell for me because my number one strength is focus. If I can't one and done it, I'm not going to be successful at something. And I'm coming to recognize this about myself. If I have to do something that requires regular maintenance, even having an assistant do it for me, it's not something I'm going to be super successful at. And Patreon requires consistency, and someone who has focus as a high strength isn't super consistent. We zero in on what we want and everything else falls away and has no power to distract us. And then we don't go back to that thing that we did. That's one of the things with focus. You do it and then you're done and you don't do it again. And that's why novels work or stories in general work super well for me and other focus people, is because you don't have to recreate that same scenario over and over again. And when I set up my Patreon account, and this is how I am with every single project, I put everything else on my life in hold until I am done, like writing everything. So when I write a book, everything else gets put on hold. I don't do email during that time. I don't do anything. And then when I'm done with that, same with marketing, I don't do anything else anything else except what I'm currently focusing on. And it's very dissatisfying to me and nearly impossible to do things that I have to do over and over again. Anyway, so I think what I'm trying to say is if you have a focus as a high strength, you're going to need to find a different way to make the 1,000 true fans concept work for you. And if you're also practical like me or don't have time to sell direct, and I hate shipping things, you'll probably decide that 10,000 true fans is what you need to reach the goal of 100,000 a year. And Lindsay has a quick comment. 2 seconds though. But again, what? No, not you, me. I need to finish my thought process here. Sorry. But again, I wrote all this before listening to Lindsay and Joe, and like just hearing another opinion, I'm like, you know what? They're right. If you have true fans, and I know I have true fans, but I don't have 1,000 of them, then they're going to do things that you don't expect people to do. Like they surprise you and all of that. So I don't know. So we'll see how things go with me with medical romance. Part of the problem is I get super excited for this project and I start it, but then kids and life distract and take me away from things. And so I'm not able to really hit full burn on things. And I'm really hoping with medical romance, it'll be a little bit different. Plus we're almost done having kids, and then it'll be all uphill or downhill. I don't know. It'll all be better after that. Anyway, Lindsay.
I just wanted to say that I feel like maybe you're, not confusing is not the word. You're thinking of this as books sold. That's it. This is how many books, paperbacks, audiobooks you can sell. But in the essay, he's very, these need to be the people that you have some higher tier that they're going to spend more. Like it's not just, you don't have to put in more work necessarily. and do more things. Like I would say almost every traditional published author I've come across on Patreon, in sci-fi and fantasy at least, they don't do anything. they sometimes they do like blog posts, but a lot of them are just like, hey, we need a little extra money. We only get paid twice a year by traditional publishing. And they've got people that are just, I was just looking at one, there's a couple, they started publishing in the 80s, so they've been around for a while and been consistent, but they do a book or less a year with their traditional contract, and they're getting like $3,200 a month from Patreon, just from fans that want to support them, and they're not doing more work. I actually noticed they blog more now, and I think that's probably because they've had their fans have excited them, and they're paying them every month, and they're excited about it. Like when I looked at them 2 years ago, I think it was just like, hey, we're having trouble with the bills, so if you want to support us, we'd appreciate it. And so it's the whole idea with the true fan is beyond. They're willing to put down money beyond the latest book, and you don't necessarily have to publish more books a year for them. It's just that the hard part is getting the true fans, and it's usually a result of having had some success. And so that's the hard part, right? It's easy for us to say, having had some success, this is how you do it, guys. It's easy. You just write books that people love and sell enough of them to find the true fans. Duh. So there's that. So this is, like I said, it's something for probably mid-list authors and above is kind of where you're going to get to this point where, and having been published for a while, like it's going to be hard if maybe it's your very first series, or, we talk about it, it's always hard if you're jumping genres and pen names and things, because you're kind of starting over from scratch each time. So it's a little easier if you pick a route and really write something that appeals to X number of people, a certain audience, and give them more of what they love, and that's what they'll pay for you. But I have authors I love that I guess I'll talk more about this later, but like I would happily sign up for their Patreon, and they're not on there. Like, why? It's like the older generation, people that started publishing in the 70s and 80s, not everybody. Lots of older folks are totally dialed in and on there and stuff too, but some are not, maybe not know that's an option. Like, hey, you want to make $3,000 extra a month? Why wouldn't you? So yeah, I really do think that it has to be, you're finding the fans that are willing to pay more than the $5 for an ebook.
Okay. And see, that makes sense. And like what you were saying earlier, I wrote only fantasy. I didn't jump from fantasy, but I wrote kids illustrated fantasy books and middle grade and young adult, and those are way different audiences, And so, and then also, I while you were talking, it reminded me of, I do my direct sales where I take the works of Andrea. So everything I wrote during a certain period of time that relates to a certain series, and I put that in an ebook, and I add illustrations and I sell it to people direct. And even people who've already bought all of those books, they still buy those because they want everything. And so I'm like, that's true. See, that's a really good point. And Joe, did you want to make your comment about the tip thingy?
Just that I've heard people refer to sort of Patreon accounts that you don't get additional content for. People just refer to them as a tip jar, where it's like, hey, listen, just if you want to throw some money my way, I'll appreciate it.
See, that's a really good point. And both of you, like, no, not extra work, anything that doesn't require extra work would be really nice. I tried doing that with Patreon, but it was like moving molasses to get people excited. I think I got like 15 Patreon supporters, and I was like, I'm not doing enough to make it feel worth it to them, even though they probably were like, nope, you're fine. But to me, I was like, I don't want to take advantage of them, but that's me. And my insecurities right there. But okay,
well,
so
that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And Joe, you're the one that's going to know this. Who's the lady who Neil Gaiman? I don't know if they're married or whatever, but she did the whole book and YouTube about like the art of accept. You have to be willing to like accept things people want to give you, and how hard it is. I'll put her name in the show notes when I remember it later. Like there's a great video on YouTube. Yeah, Amanda Palmer.
Amanda Palmer.
Yeah. So she's got a good video on, because I feel that way too. I have I don't charge my Patreons every month because don't put something out every month. I only charge them when I release new books. I just would feel like I don't want to do that if I'm not giving them something. But you have to realize that some people enjoy your book so much, hopefully, that they just want to support you. Like that's the whole concept, like with the Patreon that came from, was the idea that the rich people in the middle, in the Renaissance or whatever, wanted to support artists in order to have them create art, and that's just how you bought your bread.
I love that this has become like a counseling session for Andrea.
Also a commercial for Patreon. Are they going to sponsor us? Maybe they could kick some money our way. The tip jar. I don't know.
All right. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and go on to the next one. So how do we personally gain true fans? And I think this is where we're going to have the ideas for our listeners. And then I'm trying to make sure I'm not being super discouraging in my comments. I might be discouraging again, guys. I apologize. I'm not recreating everything though. Okay, Joe, go ahead.
All right. So the largest hunk of my true fans came from my style clicking with them. Like the nice thing about a true fan, like a fan at this level, is you usually don't have to wonder why they like you because they will usually tell you. Maybe these are emails that I've received, and I'll go into it in a second why, emails are so big on my little list here, but I'll get stuff like, oh, well, thanks for writing a hero that looks like me, or I appreciate the lack of profanity and no overly steamy scenes, or I can't get enough of the banter between so and so and such, or the dragon is so cute. Like you get a very clear idea from people who really love your stuff why they love it because they want to talk to you about it. I've gotten physical, fan letters that are in a drawer that I can't point to because my hand disappears. But there's a drawer inside in the cabinet of awesomeness that's got like handwritten stuff from folks. So super fans are usually pretty. I can't even say usually. A proportion of your super fans, a representative one, will let you know why they like your stuff, and it really helps you guide. If you're looking to get more folks like that, it really helps you guide your way. And I also upgraded a lot of fans to super fans simply by acknowledging them. And this is not going to work for everybody, and it's not really sustainable in huge numbers, but answering an email or answering them on Twitter, I don't know that you could create or maintain a list of 1,000 fans in that way. But I again, because they told me, I've had folks be like, hey, listen, they sent me I answered them on Twitter, and then they emailed me later, and it just felt so nice to know that you're listening to your fans and stuff like that. So some of my oldest and dearest fans remain so because they sent a piece of fan mail or they tagged me in an image and I thanked them for it. So engaging with fans in a very small way can have a really outsized effect on their loyalty and affection for you as a creator. And often it's not even all it will do is give them the desire to take a second look. And then when they take a second look, like, oh, what else do they have? Then they start seeing more stuff that they like, and they just, slide down the path to being a super fan. So yeah, acknowledging fans has worked really well for me.
All right, and before I answer, Amanda Palmer, The Art of Asking. It was a TED Talk she did in 2013. So I will put that in the show notes. It's been obviously since probably 2013 since I watched it. So apologies for not remembering that there on the ball. But so the question is, how do we personally gain true fans? And like I said earlier, to some extent, this simply happens if you sell enough books and some percentage of people really connect with your style and your content, and you become kind of a I'll buy anything you put out person for them. But you can sometimes turn someone from casual to super by putting out some bonus stuff or just kind of being there and connecting with people on social media, being personable in your newsletters. And if people start to like you as a person or feel grateful for all the free extras you give them, they're more likely to start to care about and want to support you rather than just being loyal to X series and the characters in that series. That said, I am certainly a true fan for authors who have never engaged in me in any way, never put out any content that I didn't have to pay for, and rarely, if ever, post on their website and social media. Like I said before, these are often authors who got started maybe in the 70s and 80s, and they might be in their 60s or 70s and 80s now themselves, and maybe they aren't as up on things like Kickstarter and Patreon, and they don't necessarily realize, or maybe they don't care, or they don't realize that they can make a lot more if they sort of capitalize on how many true fans they've built up over the years that, unless you go to conventions or get email from readers, sometimes you don't even know that somebody is your true fan. I always assume that for every email you get saying something, there are probably 9 other people that have that same thought, and you just never know. So whenever somebody tells me that they recommend their books, my books, to everybody they know that reads, I'm like, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Like I never want to underestimate how powerful that is, because I know, especially with like the older series that I don't market anymore, I suspect a lot of that there's some word of mouth in there, or just, you know, fans mentioning them on blogs and social media. And, you know, it's taken 10 plus years to get to that point. It's not like it happens overnight. So if it's not happening for you yet, hopefully it will soon. But yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily have to do all this extra work. It's sort of like the work you're doing every day and every year for your career is going to almost as a byproduct. These fans will hopefully be created if you're, you know, doing your craft well, and you're kind of striking a chord with enough people. So I would say just continue on with what you're doing, but then realize at some point, like if you're annoyed with how little you're making from your book sales, but you know you have lots of readers and lots of people who do buy those releases, that may be the time, especially when it's worth doing. Like sometimes people do Patreon too early, where they're kind of hoping it's going to be a form of like, maybe people will find me on Patreon and start. Yeah, and sometimes that happens a little bit on Kickstarter. Like if something gets selected, you may get a little lucky that way. But usually on Patreon, you have to bring the people to it. They're not just going to find you. So you have to create the books first that create the true fans who then are willing to support you on Patreon. So it's not Patreon first, you know? So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, if you're doing all the other stuff, this will happen kind of gradually, even if you're gruff and not available on the internet, or even if you don't have a newsletter. Just those things all help you a little bit, because they help you reach out to people, like let them know when you started a Kickstarter or Patreon or whatever.
And I know I'm going to mention it again later, but I mean, Lindsay hits on it there a little bit, like consistency, you know, being consistent, even if, I mean, not letting 2 years of publishing get you discouraged and continuing. Like if you enjoy it, then you're going to be doing it the rest of your life anyway. So why stop and take 2 years off? I don't know. Anyway, I know I'm on a personality kick right now. Like it's all I'm thinking about, because it's been so eye-opening to how and I thought I knew myself. I mean, I've taken so many personality tests and things like that, but this whole Clifton Strength thing, and again, they should be paying us just like Patreon should be paying us. But taking that test really opened my eyes to who I am and how I am, and working around your strengths instead of trying to make your weaknesses stronger is so beneficial. Anyway, but I'm going to say it depends on your strengths. So for example, communication is a top strength of mine. This means I'm good at communicating things in a way that people understand and for maximum effectiveness at driving ideas home. I'm also number 5, woo, which I hate the word woo. I'm like, ugh, really? But it stands for winning others over. And that means it's really easy for me to win people to my way of thinking, easier than maybe it would be for someone else. With those 2 strengths, I can read how people are taking my messages, and I can tweak accordingly to help them see things better my way. This works obviously best in person, but it also works in emails and social media. So my enthusiasm, and I was saying earlier, I'm not that enthusiastic a lot of the time, but I'm more enthusiastic than most people are, because I'm that, you know, I'm like, hey guys, stupid bubbly stuff. My enthusiasm for something is contagious, and I'm able to convert casual fans to super fans just by being myself. And that explains why my fantasy newsletter was so successful at getting opens and reads. Like it was a very well-read newsletter. Unfortunately, even true fans move on. And if you never respond to them again, they'll lose excitement. And that's me. I hate email so much that and during my burnout phase, I didn't respond to emails for like 5 months. Like I just, you know, that burnout lasted 1.5 years, and I just barely got over that the past few months. Anyway, so both my winning others over strength and my focus strength work against me in this way. Woo personalities tend to move on quickly once they've met someone, made a connection, etc. They want to go make connections with other people. They thrive off of meeting strangers, not continuing relationships with everyone they meet. I only have 1 or 2 really close friends at a time. I keep everyone else at arm's distance, and it's not on purpose. It's far from being on purpose. It's just hard for me to focus long enough to make relationships meaningful. The amount of energy it takes depletes me quickly. And I know that is like an introvert quality, but I'm like super extroverted, but I just would rather maintain really deep relationships with only a couple people, 1 or 2 people. And this is not necessarily super applicable to making true fans. You don't have to have a deep relationship. You only need to connect with them maybe once or twice. But for me, it's harder for me to connect with them over time. Like if you don't respond to their second email ever, then, which is kind of something that would happen possibly with me, it's harder for them to want to stick around. You know, they're like, okay, so I still like them, but what happened? You know, if you have other high strengths, it might be harder to gain a fan in the first place, but it will be possibly easier to maintain that relationship over time. And then to answer the question more directly, for me, gaining true fans happens when I'm able to communicate with them in some way, just like what Lindsay and Joe said. Once I get them on my newsletter list, I'm more sure of my ability to win them over. This is going to be the same for everyone, but the gist of what I said above is, if it's hard for you to answer an email, do it anyway after you go through that. Yeah. Like, I hope Nolan doesn't listen to this episode, because he would kill me if he knew I was saying this. It takes him 2 or 3 days to email somebody once. And I'm like, just do it. Just do it. Dang it. Anyway, sorry, Nolan.
He's the INTJ, because you know how long it takes me to make calls? Like, I've got to make an appointment or something. I was like, oh my gosh, I can put that off for weeks.
Yeah, that's Nolan. And I'm like, just do it. It's like the anticipation is worse than the actual call or email itself. Anyway, so do it anyway, like I said, but recognize it'll probably be easier for you to maintain that relationship over time than it would be for someone with focus and woo as top strengths, who finds it easier to gain fans in the first place. And again, going back to Nolan, like we did, I've talked about my gaming YouTube channel here. I haven't done anything there for a few months, so I haven't brought it up again, but once I brought him on board, it was a phenomenal partnership, because I'm really great at getting people excited in the first place, but I suck at maintaining things. And he's really great at maintaining things. And so I was like, okay, you take over comments. So he would go in and comment on things, and he built relationships just by answering people's comments on the YouTube channel. And they became true fans of our channel, and we got money through them, which makes me sound like such a philanthropist. But you know, between the two of us, I would make the initial connection, and then he would maintain that connection. That worked really, really well. So I don't know how that helps our listeners, though. I don't know.
Well, I kind of want to comment on this, because
Okay.
you're actually talking about like being a personality, which is, you know, I think that you have to continually do it to keep people engaged and interested. I feel like with authors, if you're able to like write one series that people really love, which easier said than done, they will go back to that series every few years and reread it. And it's like, they're never going to forget about you, because they fell in love with that series, and they're going to like share it with their kids or their grandkids. And I'm not sure, like, I know, like, you hear YouTube personality people talk, and how much their traffic drops off and stuff if they're not continuously putting out new stuff. And I know authors feel that way too. And I always I have much better months when I release new books, no surprise there. So it is hard to, even if it's like your series that they fall in love with, you still have to kind of put effort into keeping it selling usually. I mean, if you're with traditional publishing, and, you know, they keep your series in print and selling, and they do some marketing, yay. I'm not sure it happens that way for most authors, but yeah, it was interesting listening to you talk, because I feel like you're almost talking like as a personality, an online personality, and obviously a real personality, a real person, and that kind of how it would work that way, versus maybe somebody falling in love with one of your series that you've written 10 books in, and it becomes one of their favorite series. Because I certainly have authors where they haven't put out anything new in 20 years in that series, but every now and then I go back and reread it, and I still love it. And like, if I heard that they were doing Patreon or something now, I'd be like, oh, sure, I'll support them. I enjoyed those books, and I've read them many times. So like I said, easier said than done to create a series that becomes that for somebody. And probably not all of your series will hit like that. I have maybe 2 or 3 that are real fan favorites, and then a lot of ones that are like, you know, we'll read them because we like that style, but they didn't, for whatever reason, they don't connect. And I looking back, there are some of my series where like, oh, that's a much stronger series than this one. I don't know what my point is there, just that if you're able to kind of create that series that people fall in love with, you don't necessarily, I think, have to continuously put in more effort, other than maybe keeping it selling, you know, trying to keep it going at a kind of a baseline level too, because you said it yourself, not every fan is for life, and you do get some attrition. People pass away, you know, I've had that happen a lot of times. People have like responded to newsletters like, this person is gone now, and, you know, so can you take them off the mailing list? And it's just kind of a sad thing, that fact of life that you see over as your career goes on longer and longer. So that was a bit rambly. I don't know. Just a thought.
No, that's helpful. You have a point there. Like, I mean, my favorite author, my all-time, not all-time favorite author, but my favorite author since I've indie published is a romance author. And I'm not going to mention her by name because I don't know if she listens to the episodes or not. But her books, I just went through a phase the last month or so where I read them for the third or fourth time. I just went through and read all my favorites all over again, and which is unfortunate. I would love to give her money for those again, but I can't because I've already bought them on Amazon. But you make a really good point there. Like, and yeah. So
I feel like if you become that for someone, like I have an author, I love that she kind of brought me into sci-fi romance as a fan, and she traditionally published, and I don't think that genre really ever worked well for trad publishing. It's just too niche. And she hasn't put out anything new in like 8 years, but I want more. And I go and look, I'm like on her Facebook, like have you on her website, I'm like looking for stuff every year or so. I think about it, and I often reread those books. So that is the goal we all have. We want to become that for our readers. And like I said, I don't have the magic answer on how you do that. So is this a motivational episode or what?
Yeah. And that author of mine, she's not consistent. Like, she'll publish like 3 books in 1 year, and then she'll go 2 or 3 years without publishing anything. And if you're that kind of author, it's super frustrating on the reader's perspective to be like, oh, does she have any new stuff? Nope. Dang it, I'm gonna have to reread her old stuff. So just again, a hint towards the consistency. Okay, so what are things we've done in the past that lost us fans? And I feel like Joe hasn't talked in forever. Sorry, Joe, but it is Lindsay's turn again.
Joe has to chime in more. I always have something to say to what you guys say. Joe's just quietly doing his own thing over there. He's being polite and not butting in, unlike me where I'm like, my turn, Andrea, I have something to say. I'll make this quick though. The main thing that I have done that I know has lost me fans because they've emailed and told me so, going exclusive with Amazon and not putting out new books everywhere at the same time anymore. And that's probably why, I would say that's the number one reason I will not do the exclusivity thing forever. I'm using it now because I can make more money and get everything set for retirement early. Not that authors generally really want to retire, but it's nice to know everything is cool whenever you want to stop working or cut way back. But that's kind of a limited amount of time I'm going to put up with that exclusivity thing because the fans hate it. The KU readers love it, obviously, but it's very frustrating, as we all know, to have to sign that exclusivity deal to have your books in Kindle Unlimited. So that's the main thing. I would say, and I'm not sure anybody's actually emailed me this, maybe a couple of times, but just doing new series or characters that are drastically different and possibly offensive to readers who came in via the older stuff. I remember I did have some complaints with my second series when I put in a sex scene in book 1, and they were like, whoa, what is this? We don't like this. We prefer books that don't have profanity and sex scenes. Not to mock anybody that prefers that, but don't email the author and lecture them. That's not cool. You got Goodreads, go rant on there with it. But that would be the other thing. If you do something a lot different, you can lose people that liked you for X certain reason. Like maybe you were clean, wholesome romance, and then you decided with one series you want to let loose and have sex scenes and or profanity. For some reason, those are the 2 things that get people really riled up. Politics, religion too, to some extent. But I feel like that's more understandable, the politics, having a strong moral opinion on things. Why just skip the sex scene? That seems like a dumb thing to rant about. Sorry, apparently I was going to rant before I let Joe talk. Joe?
Unfortunately, I don't have a tremendous amount to say, but I'll try to say it a lot. Yes, and I also have heard from true fans, and again, you don't typically, because true fans tend to be very enthusiastic about how much they like you. When they stop liking you, that enthusiasm fades, so you frequently don't actually hear from them when on why they left. But I have had fans who were very enthusiastically supporting me directly let me know once I released the Shards of Shadow series, my first series length attempt at exclusivity. They were like, yeah, I guess I'll never know what's in those books because I'm not going to do an Amazon exclusive. And also I have 3 what I would call mainstream series. Well, now I probably have 5 mainstream series, but speaking of the period of time that we're covering here, epic fantasy space opera, sci-fi, and steampunk, and there are people who were like, "This is great," and like they were happy that I was alternating between them because they like to be able to alternate between those two. But every now and then I would throw in an oddball, and they'd be like, "I don't really like the oddball," and eventually my tastes and my evolving style would stray far enough from what they were enthusiastic about. They're just like, maybe if you come back to the series I like, then I'll come back to you. Like I've had some indication of that as well. And also I've had that happen in reverse. I've had the instance where somebody found one of my oddball stories and was like, "This is amazing. It's so unique. I've never read anything like this." And then, they go and they expect me to keep on giving them these gems of strangeness that they can't find anywhere else. And I'm like, well, you get maybe one every 2 years. So basically divergence from the taste that attracted them in the first place and making the book unavailable in their platform of choice are like the two main offenders.
For me, it's stopping writing altogether, which is kind of an obvious thing. When I switched my new releases to KU or moved all my books to KU completely, I actually, my true fans complained, but they moved with me. I know of several that were like, "I hate Amazon." And then they're like, "I loved your latest book." I'm like, "So you're buying on Amazon then?" Anyway, I felt bad about that, of course, but I really appreciated them for moving with me. I've lost fans mainly by not releasing books, which is a huge important part of this 1,000 True Fans concept. You need to be releasing material quickly and all that. Lindsay, did you want to make your comment, or do you want me to finish my part?
Oh, no, you can finish. I just wanted to comment before we moved on to the next subject.
Okay. All right. So also my fantasy newsletter list, I've only emailed them a couple of times this year. I'm on hiatus, yes, but I also don't plan to return for a long, long time. It's not like I'm throwing a temper tantrum or anything like that. Maybe I am, but I burned out so bad. It was such an epic burnout. And then I also realized I was running my list in a way that was, I've talked about that in the past, but anyway, so not communicating with them is pretty much forcing them to drop their super fan status. And I recognize that. But like Lindsay also said, like Lindsay said, changing the tone of my books, the Clinton Chronicles, when they were first released, were geared more to middle grade kids. And I've rewritten them now and they better match other things I've written now. But my Mosaic Chronicles has a darker feel. This really turned off a couple of readers, and they actually emailed me. They're like, "Yeah, I don't like this. It's like dark." And I'm like, "It's not even that dark compared to what's out there." But I'm sure I had a lot of others who didn't email me. But anyway, it's still fairly mild, and it is my flagship series. I've gained most of my fans through that series, and my true fans have all, except for a handful, have all come from that series. And so I don't know. Well, the Clinton Chronicles, now the way it is now, it's doing super well, super well compared to what it was before. And so I am gaining fans for that. So anyway, go ahead, Lindsay.
Yeah, I also did a darker one with my Dragon Gate series, especially book 1. It kind of gets less dark after that, and definitely had some emails and reviews, like a 2-star review right off, like, "Oh man, this sucks. Lindsay's going to work on this series forever and not do more of the stuff that I want," or for not forever, but like for the next year or two. I was like, thanks, buddy. So that is a possible, I don't know what the word is, problem that you can encounter. If you want to be creative and change up your styles, you have to decide, like, I do have other readers that, they find, they're like, "Yeah, this is different." But then as they read more of them, they were like, "Oh, actually, it's kind of, a lot of the stuff we like about your style is still there." But my comment was actually kind of for all of us, because I think we all mentioned Kindle Unlimited. I think that a true fan often will follow you to another store. I have had a number of people that said, like, "Oh, they only they started buying books for the Kindle because my books were only on Amazon." And so I think a lot of true fans, like, I feel like I've bought stuff before from places I don't usually shop, because that was where, like, the what do you call it, advanced reader copy was on sale or something. So it's not like you're going to make everybody hate you. But I think the problem in this case is that some people have really strong feelings about Amazon. They don't want to support Amazon. Not necessarily, like, if you switch from Kobo to Barnes and Noble, they might be like, "Oh, okay, I guess I'll get that now." Because a lot of these things, you just get the different app on whatever your device is. It's not like you have to go buy a Kindle. So realize that probably you're kind of sleeping with the enemy in some people's opinions. Whereas like nobody would probably have object to you suddenly releasing something exclusive on your own site. I feel like almost everybody would like be in support of that. Like, yeah, you're going to keep more of the money. Like I'll come to your site, even though I usually shop at Apple. So just something to be aware of. Like, it's not necessarily that true fans generally will follow you, but if you're clashing up against some corporation that they've decided is the evil empire, that could be the problem more than them not being a true fan.
Yeah, that's a good point. I love authors. We all have this hate-love relationship with Amazon. We're like, yes, thank you for the money. I love you. And I hate you at the same time. And that's true with readers and pretty much everybody in general. Okay, so what are things we've seen other authors do to gain or lose fans?
There are a few very clear, very public examples of major authors revealing opinions or beliefs that range from unpopular to dangerous. And in general, skeletons in one's closet can turn away even the most stalwart fan if they're rotten enough. So there's plenty of ways that you can lose fans in that way. Because again, we're talking about you gain super fans by having a connection, and that connection can seem very personal. And when that personal connection it reveals something about the person that you don't like about people, it can feel like a betrayal, and it can flip very quickly in the other direction. In terms of gaining fans, I've seen folks, mostly people in other mediums like art, will gain huge numbers of fans by way of collaboration with someone with a similar but so far unexplored audience. So artists I know have done animations for big YouTubers and have basically gotten an entirely new, refreshed career by doing so. Musicians bringing on guests. I can't think of any specific examples in the author world, but it's downright certain that more than one career has had their, has been made by starting to work with another author or producing an entry in an extended universe series and getting popular in that way. And now I realize Kevin J. Anderson in Dune is an excellent example, where he had certainly a career, but Kevin J. Anderson is now inextricably linked to the ongoing Dune novels. And I would say that a fair number of people who became avid readers of his were actually avid readers of Dune and just really wanted to support everything that came out. And it just sort of branched into super fandom.
My only comment on this one is I think I was thinking lose fans more than gain fans. We talked a little bit about gaining fans already, but being loathsome in the fans' eyes on social media or your blog or newsletter, and you may not think you're being loathsome, but if they are on the other side of the opinion, whether it's politics or religion or just it's become a very hard, difficult time to navigate without putting your foot in your mouth. And I feel like people are a lot quicker to take offense right now. Maybe everybody's just really agitated because things are not going well in the world and with people's lives. And it's very easy to say something that ticks people off. So I think Andrew's going to talk about this, but I never talk about politics, religion, anything vaguely possibly controversial on my author pages, just because like if people do, that's their choice. I'm sure they know they might lose some fans, but I always try not to assume that I know who my fan is, because I've had too many emails from people that are like complete opposite spectrum politics and religions from me, and they like my books, and it's sometimes puzzling to me because I think some of what I believe naturally as an author, this will come through in your writing and your characters. But yeah, I don't want to go out of my way to alienate anyone. Almost everybody, I feel like if you just talk not on social media, but if you talk to people at a dinner or something, you can get along with almost anybody. It's really weird how extreme everybody is on the internet. Like you probably only disagree on like 3% of things in the world, but you're going to make them your arch enemy because of that. Okay, sorry, ranty. But yeah, being loathsome in the fans' eyes, or we talked about before, just if you really change, if you completely change genres and your style changes a lot, like the genre thing might not be that big of a deal, but if you go from like happy and comedic to I want to stretch my my muscles as a creator and do something really dark, that may not be what they sign on for.
So just to comment with Joe, I mean, Brandon Sanderson and Wheel of Time, I mean, he was big already, but Wheel of Time kind of exploded him to a lot of people who didn't know who he was. And then of course, Michael Anderle, he's like, hey, be co-author with me. And then that author, becomes pretty successful. But this is why I always recommend an author avoid any controversial topic, mainly those that have nothing to do with our books. I've seen so many authors lose fans over simple posts on Facebook. To me, my personal opinion is our goal is to entertain readers. Even if you write political thrillers, discussing politics is only going to lose you fans, regardless of which side you support. And because political thrillers can be enjoyed by pretty much any party, unless you put current political things in them and make it obvious which side you support. So, I'm not the kind of person who will stop enjoying a book because I find that the author has opinions I don't agree with, but there are tons of people, like Lindsay was saying, who are that way. And it's better to keep your opinions to yourself or not and deal with the inevitable fallout that you may or may not hear about. And Larry Correa actually comes to mind. I don't know if you guys know who he is, but he is super open about politics and stuff. And he's like, I don't want people reading me who disagree with me. And his books are, I mean, he's been super like wildly successful. So I'm like, I guess it's your mileage may vary, and just recognize that it does affect you and it can lose fans for you, but it can also gain fans for you. But for me, I just avoid controversial topics. They make me uncomfortable. Okay. So and Lindsay's got a point. We're going to try to stick to our script now, because we do have 3. I mean, we could do a split episode and do Q&As. I mean, would you like to do that?
I think we should power through and finish.
Okay.
We'll do it. I am the one who's been wandering off on rants. So I'm going to just, that was a note for me, not for you, Andrea. Okay. I said, I'll try to stick to the script so we can finish up.
I think listeners enjoy the discussion, the back and forth. That's why they listen to us over guest interviews, because guest interviews don't always have the back and forth that when we have guests on, that we get.
Yeah, we can't grill them like we can grill each other. Like, we try to be polite.
Yes. Like, do you really believe that? Okay, so how does 1,000 True Fans apply when you write in different genres? So, and then basically, what have you done or not done to get readers to follow you to other genres? Take it away, Sir Joe.
If you take the strict definition of true fan, then absolutely that fans will follow you across genres. I've had fans inform me that they've worked through all of my fantasy, which is the largest portion of my catalog, and then decided to like sort of hold their nose and try my sci-fi, because they don't read sci-fi, but they're out of fantasy, and it's going to be a while before my next fantasy. And then they'll be like, not only did I enjoy your sci-fi book, but it turns out I enjoy sci-fi books. Like, I just didn't, I hadn't found any good ones yet, and now I realize that they can be good. Similarly, I've had a lot of people tell me that mine was their first steampunk. Like, I had already done sci-fi and fantasy, and then I tried steampunk, and they're like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And they're like, now it's their main thing. I've got one person on Twitter who constantly asks for more steampunk stuff. I don't do much specifically to entice fans of one genre to follow over to another. Again, true fans tend to be fairly engaged with you, and they'll follow you through whatever you typically spread news through. So just generally mentioning stuff is usually enough for them to, oh, I didn't know about that, let me go get that. But yeah, like the simple act of letting people know what you're doing and what's coming out will typically attract your true fans over to other genres if they didn't know about them. And yeah, that's all it really takes. That's a nice thing about true fans, is they're easy to lead into your other things.
Right. The casual fans are probably the ones that are not going to follow you to something that's not in their wheelhouse. But if your voice, your style, the types of characters you write, if they go with you to the new genre, I think the true fans will be more likely to follow. I've had people that, again, like Joe said, held their nose and read my pen name. There's this sci-fi romance with the more saucier scenes more frequently in there, and they're like, I don't like those kind of books. I don't like those kind of scenes. Oh, but these are the same kind of books you write. They just have sex scenes. I just skip those. So if you're giving them something they love and that's what drew them to you, and you continue to do that in the new genre, then they're going to be more likely to follow. If your stuff is radically different with each new series, you're going to risk not giving them more of what made them fans in the first place. So I would say, though, it's probably good to do a couple of series in one genre before hopping, because as we've kind of talked about, getting true fans is something that happens as a result of having sold a bunch of books. And your first series is kind of rare for that to really take off. Kudos to those that had to happen. But if you do a couple series in the same genre, that, you know, it gives you more time to build up readership and make sure they really like you. You know, you've given them a lot of what they like. And I think at that point, they're going to be more likely to say, oh, space opera, huh? Okay, I'll give it a try.
Yeah. Yeah. Like they said, my super fans have pretty much read everything I've written, even if they don't usually like the genre or, you know, I mean, so, okay. So this makes things difficult for algorithms. So the last time I tried writing romance was 4 years ago. And before I was ready to, I told my fantasy readers about it. And part of why it failed back then was because I wasn't ready to write it completely. And now I'm writing only medical romance, only romance. And I'm just not able to do it as quickly as I would like to. But, I think that, you know, it messed up the algorithms telling my fantasy readers, but I think that if I'd been writing more quickly, it wouldn't have been such a big deal in the long run as it ended up being with those books. So it generally isn't hard to convince super fans to read other genres or books, in my opinion. And like what they were saying, they love your stuff. They're going to be excited to find more stuff by you. Even when I told readers about my kids illustrated books, the little picture books I wrote for my kids, people have no kids in their lives bought them. And if they're more casual, it's harder to get them to go to other genres. But anyway, okay. So how do we encourage casual fans to become true fans?
So as I mentioned earlier, engagement and acknowledgement have worked wonders for me. Also, just being genuine is I find a lot of people connect with you more when the person that you purport to be is who you really are. It's easier to play the character when it's not a character. Replying to fan mail or just connecting online has been really effective. Also, just making sure people know the full breadth of your catalog, because often the first book that a casual reader encounters might not be as close to their tastes as some of your other books are. So, but they might be interested enough to give your other books a try. So this is why back matter is super duper important. And you might even, like, I always try to put, you know, I focus the back matter on the series that it's in, but I also always mention that I have other series. Originally, I mentioned every book that I have in my back matter, and now I tend to link to series pages so that it's just one line each for each of my series. And yeah, you can convert every book that a casual fan reads is one step closer to them being a super fan. And so just making sure they know about your books and, you know, giving yourself that chance to catch them with the next one or the one after that is very important.
So I think in talking about, we talked a little bit about series that really stick with readers, that they love, that they want to reread and come back to years later. A lot of that is because it's really appealed on some deeply emotional level. And I'm not going to say go kill a character to get that necessarily, but I don't know about you, but when I think about the books I really remember over the years, especially from my childhood, it's like Where the Red Fern Grows or Old Yeller or something. And it's because when you have these emotions as a reader, it just imprints in your mind. And you may even hate the author at first because they tortured you, but you'll kind of look back later and be like, oh, I totally remember that book. I recommend that book. That was such a great book. So that's not the only way, of course, but, you know, in thinking of how to craft these series that really stick with people, you know, and you can make them laugh too. I think the stronger, more dramatic emotions stick with us more. It kind of triggers sort of that negative, sort of the same sort of spot in your brain where, like, you saw the saber-toothed tiger, so you know never to return to that spot because you were in danger. Like, the really strong and sometimes strongly negative emotions are the ones that really stick with you. But that said, you know, you can of course write, like, sometimes if you just happen to write a series that it's perfectly lovely, there's no drama, terrible drama, dramatic things happening, but the reader happened to read it at a time in their life where they were going through some stuff, it'll also stick with them. And obviously we can't do anything about that as a author to construct those moments. I know I've definitely had a lot of people, they'll reach out to me where, like, they were going through cancer treatment or somebody in their family was, or something really darkly affecting them, you know, and that's, I don't know. It's just that the longer series you write, I would say, the more chance you have of kind of hitting somebody emotionally. It's a little tougher if you're writing standalones because You really have to do something powerful in that one book. That's the only chance you get to imprint on their memory. Whereas I think of as a fan of characters and longer series, that's what I'm drawn to. Like I fall in love over the course of a series. Like oftentimes some of my favorite series, the first book I was like, characters are okay. But by the end, you love them. And some authors do like 20 books in a series and that just becomes a part of your life. So that's just something to think about when you're like, how can I construct these series that make people, give them the fodder to become true fans. A little rambling there. The other thing, we've talked a little bit about like giving away extra stuff for free and kind of consistently giving more to what drew readers to you in the first place. And it's also a challenge when your muse wants you to be creative and do different things. I've been there. So I would say if you kind of do 90% of what you publish is similar in voice and style, types of characters and stories you do, and that's what's drawn to people, they'll probably forgive you if you do some experimental stuff on the side. All right, Andrea, I'll pass it to you, as I did not stick to the script because I don't know, Joe was talking and I was like, oh yeah, thinking about things. I've been thinking about the series that I love and that really have stuck with me and impacted me and why. And I think that's part of it, is having that emotional connection.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because like the author I was talking about earlier, her books, like even though she writes clean fantasy, clean romance, and clean romance is usually super upbeat, almost all of her books that I absolutely love have this really strong emotional part. And she doesn't super highlight that because most clean romance is upbeat, but it's deep and it just really hits my heart, and it just, anyway. So, and my answer to this is by being consistent, and that's not going to be a surprise to anybody, but emailing your newsletter consistently and being a consistent version of yourself in those emails. So for example, being super cranky and then super cheerful every other email is only going to give readers whiplash. Choose which version of your personality you want to go with and stay with that all the time. Not even joking there. If you're generally a cranky or snarky person, maintain that because you're going to attract readers who love that cranky, snarky personality. If you're generally cheerful, maintain that, because even one-off emotions can turn off readers, which is discouraging. But on the flip side, I've found that one-off emotions, when I'm generally cheerful, also catch attention and convert casual fans to super fans. So it's going to go both ways. I do generally recommend being consistent regardless of your current mood, though, because if you are constantly stressed, but you choose a cheerful, you're going to be constantly stressed every single email. Okay, so another suggestion is by doing random fun things, and you're going to want to think outside the box for this. Sometimes all gaining a super fan takes is to catch a casual fan's attention with something different, and you can pull them and ask them totally random question. Help them get involved in some ways, or just pull them random questions about random things. You can offer giveaways of again, random things that apply to your books and are only open to your newsletter list. For example, if you have a character who collects rubber bands, do a giveaway of that book and a rubber band collection. Do character interviews in a unique to you and your character's way. Share excerpts from your book that not only rekindles old super fans, but it can also convert new ones. There's tons of different things that you can do to convert people. And again, the sky's the limit, and you know yourself, you know what you are going to be attracted to and what will work for your readers. And if you don't, then you'll figure it out. Okay, so we have one last topic. I'm going to hand it off to Lindsay to bring it up.
Right. So kind of now that we've got you all excited to find your super fans, let's just finish up by talking about, how do you find these people to start with? Like we talked about earlier in the show, they're just not going to show up if you start a Patreon, right? Like it's, unfortunately, you're going to have to learn some of the marketing side and naturally put out good stories. But I will say I've seen a lot of indie authors blow up by giving a lot of stuff away for free to start with or concurrently. I've seen people do it by podcasting their entire series chapter by chapter. I've seen people really have success by serializing hundreds of thousands of words online, doing that all for free and consistently over time, like months and years. Usually when those people did start charging, they blew up right away because their fans that had kind of found them over time and gathered like a snowball going down a hill and got in a bigger fan base. They were dying to have permanent copies of what they'd kind of been getting in bits and chunks for over the months. And that was enough that when they released on Amazon and the other stores, that, like Joe was talking about earlier, just that 1,000 people buying it on day one, it gets the kind of kicks in the algorithm and gets things going so that you know, those people have like still flourishing careers like 10 years after they did this, because they just built such a big fan base back at the beginning. And I'm not saying that this is the only way. You need to go give away your first 10 books for free, because that's not what I did. But there's something to be said for building a fan base first and then starting to charge. So maybe book first series, if you know you're struggling to get sales at $4.99, you know, make the first series, make book one free, make the first couple books 99 cents for a time. It doesn't have to be forever, or just do your normal thing, release your books at full price, but then do something free concurrently on the side while you publish your regular novels. Just some food for thought if you're struggling. Like if everything's fine, you launched into KU, it's just going swimmingly, then you don't have to do this stuff. You know, I mean, of course they're going to appreciate it if you do some free stuff, but you know, earlier I mentioned that somebody started right out on Patreon with a $65 donation for the first time. He said he found me by listening to all the free audiobooks I have up on YouTube first. And he was just like, yeah, here you go. I enjoyed these, so I wanted to pay what they were worth to me. So that's just something to think about. You know, like I said, you don't have to do it. It's just maybe if you're struggling and you're not seeing the success you want and you haven't been able to build up a fan base or find those true fans yet, could be something to consider.
And I don't know if you guys remember, but that the Western author comes to mind here. He was an older guy, like he had stage 4 cancer, he beated it, and he started writing books much later in life. I don't remember his name. Otherwise, I'd look him up, see what he's doing now. But he had tons of Western books that he sold for only 99 cents. And because he was releasing quickly and frequently, and because he charged little, he gained super fans very quickly. And that honestly, the charging only 99 cents doesn't work super well if you're only releasing a book or two a year. It would take too long to make it worth it if you're doing that much or doing that little. But again, like Lindsay said, giving things away is a great way to gain fans, and it's not a waste of money, and it's not like they would buy it anyway if they don't know who you are. Anyway, so, and then also of course, running regular promotions, cycling through things, basically all the stuff that we've talked about previously.
And I'll just add here that yeah, absolutely, giving stuff away for free is a fantastic way to do this. My career basically started once I did free series starters. Again, it's had better impact in the past, but it's still a marvelously effective method. And if you're doing like serialized stuff online, it really synergizes well with what we're talking about, where you engage with people, because like if you're on some sort of a social site that you're sharing this stuff, then there's going to be comments and engagement, and you can speak with people and engage with them and just sort of give them more of your personality in that way. And then you end up with a lot of people who are really connected to you as an individual, who then will hopefully follow along to the stuff that you start charging for, or just follow straight across the stuff you're already charging for. So if you can do short stuff for free regularly, you can often build up a pretty good career following that way.
Okay. I should add too,
Sorry,
real
Lindsay.
quick before I know you're trying to finish off.
No, I actually had one more quick comment. It was I found out who the author was, but go ahead, Lindsay.
Go ahead.
No.
Okay. Wait. Okay. I just want to, because I said I didn't do that, but actually that's a lie. I did audiobooks for my first 3 audiobooks, and I put them out on, I think it was iTunes at the time, was sort of the option for putting out podcast stuff, and it did work. I have people today, they're like, yeah, I originally found the first Emperor's Edge series by the free versions you were putting out on audiobooks was the name of the site at the time. It's changed hands a couple times since then, but so, you know, I think it's a thing you can try if things aren't working. It does take time. And I did want to say that there's kind of this misconception that people that get stuff for free will never pay for it, but you'd be surprised. People just looking for audiobooks to listen to while they're cooking, you know, they find something they like, they go and buy them. You know, I think I mentioned Neil Gaiman earlier for other reasons, but he's got, you know, we've commented before on he's got a YouTube interview where he says when he started getting pirated in Russia, all of a sudden he started selling tons of books in Russia because, you know, you find something that was, remember Napster, guys? I was like, this is a free way to find music. And I bought so many CDs during that couple years where I was on Napster and it was a thing. All right. Sorry, Andrew, give us the author.
Yeah, his name is CJ Petit. I don't know, but he's still doing really, really well. Like I know because publisher Rocket just told me. So he does have some books up at $3.99. So if you guys want to go check him out just to see what he does, how often he's publishing, things like that. When he first started out, he published only at 99 cents. Like I said, he's got a bunch up at $3.99 now, but he's just, his philosophy was to just give to his readers and give, he just wanted to make things accessible, and that made him successful. So yeah, I don't know, I think we've done enough. Guys,
I think we've done more than enough.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, do either of you have any further comments, anything you want to add?
Nope.
Commented enough. I've commented so very much on this episode, including in sections I wasn't supposed to comment on.
All right, everyone. Thank you for listening, and thank you to Joshua Pearson. This is actually his last time producing the show. He got a job making a gazillion more, and it has a more stressful schedule, and so he's not going to be producing our show anymore. But so thank you to Josh for the last 2 years of helping us out. We really appreciate that. And you guys, listeners, whatever, not Lindsay and Joe. I don't know why my brain was like, you guys. You can find the show notes or leave a comment or question at sixfigureauthors.com with the number 6. Come join the Facebook group. And yeah, we will talk to you all later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So long, everybody.